Hello, hi everyone. So today in this quick video we are going to discuss PMP processes, process groups, and knowledge areas. We will try to understand what is the difference between different processes, how these processes related to process groups, and how process groups and processes are related to different knowledge areas. Let's begin then. What is a process? What is a project management process? A project management process is a group of activities, group of tasks which we perform as part of our management process, which we perform as part of our day-to-day project management activities. These tasks or these activities takes some input from some other processes or other activities, then uses some tools and techniques, and then deliver some new outputs. So basically, if we want to understand this with a flow, this goes in this way. We have various project management processes. What they do, they take various inputs. These inputs may be from other processes. This input may be from your organization's libraries. These inputs may be some environmental inputs. These inputs may be anything which may be required to perform the activities which are done as part of these processes. Right? So they will take the inputs, then they will produce some outputs. Now, what are the outputs which are produced by project management processes? So these outputs may be some new outputs like a new document or a new plan or a new calculations or some new strategic things, etc. Or these outputs may be some update of some outputs from other processes. We will explain this thing with an example. Say for let's see. We'll just discuss this with a simple example. Okay, fine. Let's suppose we have this process identify risks. Fine. We have one process in project management which is identify risks. So what identify risks does? Identify risks takes some input. Identify this takes some inputs like say the project management plan or say the project charter, etc. Say stakeholder management plan. Okay, so identify risk process may take inputs from all these documents, and it may produce an output. The output may be the output which is produced by identify risk is risk register. So what identify risk process does, it takes some input, it performs some activities, and then it produces risk register and many other things we are not going to discuss. We are just discussing how it works basically, right? Fine. So this is what processes do in project management. We'll go back to our presentation. So how how processes transform or produce some outputs from various inputs. To do that, the processes have to implement some tools and techniques, right? So basically, if we think about again our example like identify risks, so what tools and techniques are used by identify risks? Tools and techniques may be expert judgment, right? How we use expert judgment? Say we have a list of activities out of which we have to identify a few risks. In that case, we have to use our judgment, we have to use our experience to identify those risks, right? So identify risks. So expert judgment is a tools and technique. So expert judgment is a tool to perform the identify risks process. Like that, we have many other tools. So this is the whole thing about the processes in project management. Now we know what are the processes. These tools and techniques, that is inputs, I comes from inputs, TT comes from tools and techniques, and O comes from ITTOs. So basically these inputs, tools and techniques and outputs are abbreviated as ITTOs. If you discuss about any project in project management, if you talk about any project in project management, you will have associated ITTOs for each and every process. We have ITTOs for, say, develop project charter. We have ITTOs for develop project management plan. We have ITTOs for, monitoring and control, etc., etc. Right? So project management, the whole project management is nothing but accumulation of multiple processes. So if you have to deliver something as part of your project, you have to perform all the processes mentioned, all the processes which are part of project management, right? So basically the cumulative performance of these processes gives us the ultimate deliverable of the project. Now we'll go and understand what are process groups. Right? What are process groups in PMP? What are process groups in PMI standard? Process groups are nothing but groups of same kind of processes which are available. So suppose some of the processes you have which are related to initiating the project, right? Like your develop project charter, right? So before starting your project management, what we do is the very first point, we develop the project charter, right? So this process is kind of an initiating process, right? So we have other initiation processes as well. So all those processes are grouped as part of initiating process group. So like that, we have a total of 5 process group. We'll discuss one by one. The first process group is initiating process group. Initiating process group and includes all the processes in project management which are there for initiating purpose, initiating activities. One example we got is the develop project charter. Then comes our planning process group. Whatever the processes are there as part of which you are going to plan things as a project manager. Suppose you are going to plan your cost management, you are going to plan your stakeholder management, you are going to plan your, say, risk management. Like that, all the planning processes which are there in project management, those processes are grouped under planning process group. Then comes our executing process group. If we are undertaking, we are working on some project, what we do ideally is we have to deliver something, isn't it? To deliver something, you have to execute processes. You have to have some, processes which are going to produce the result. In case of your, say, some IT project, you have to write the code, you have to build a prototype and all those stuffs, right? So those processes, all the processes related to actually delivering something, actually producing something, all those processes come under executing process group. Fine. For an example, suppose you are a project manager and you have to acquire resources, right? So at first you will plan how to acquire resources. That process will go to planning process group. And once your planning is done, you will actually acquire the resources. So that particular acquire resources process will fall under executing process group, which is this one, the third quadrant. Fine. So basically, whatever we are doing to deliver something or producing something, all those processes comes under executing process group. For another example for executing process, while doing risk management, you have to implement some plan while some risk occurs. So those implementing the plans, the processes as part of which you are going to implement those plans or your strategy, those processes will come under executing process group. That means you are actually doing something. You or your team are actually doing something, right? So what's the fourth one? The fourth one is your closing process group. Once we are done with all our delivery, once we are done with all the approval and all the stuff in a project, we have to finally close the project, isn't it? So to close the project, we have some specific processes which will perform the task related to closing the project. For example, we have to close all our contracts. We have to take the final approval. We have to accumulate our best practices. We have to collect the lessons learned by all the teams. We have to update our project management information system. We have to update our, we may need to update some of the templates of our organization. There may be many other things during whatever we need to do during the closing phase of the project. Right? So all those processes are grouped under closing process group. Right? So till now we have discussed initiating, which is related to initiating the project. We have discussed planning, which is related to the processes by which we plan things. We have discussed executing process group, which is related to the processes by which we actually produce something. And we have discussed closing process group. Closing process group includes all the processes which are related to closing the project. So what's the fifth process group? What's the fifth and last process group in PMI standard? The fifth process group is monitoring and control process group. As the name suggests, what we do as part of the processes which are related to monitoring and control. Basically, all the processes which are there to monitor what is going on, to monitor whether the project is going on as per our plan, whether baselines of the project are being made, whether we are under budget till now, whether our trend shows that we will be under budget, etc., etc. So all those monitoring processes and all the controlling processes. What do you mean by when we say control processes? As a project manager, if you see that something is not going as per your plan, if you see that the trend of something is not okay with you, if the trend follows, then you might go over budget or you might be behind schedule. So if that happens, as a project manager or as a project management team, you would like to take some corrective or some preventive actions, right? So basically you want to control the project. There are some processes which you want to implement so that you have control over your project. So all those processes comes under monitoring and control process group. Fine, well enough. Now my question is, why we are encompassing this monitoring and control process group? Why we are encompassing all the 4 other process group by this MNC, monitoring and control process group? So in this case, there are 2 points to be noted. The first point, these process groups are not sequential thing, right? These are just some logical grouping of processes, that's it. You should not think in a way that initiating process groups comes first, planning process group comes second. No. All process groups are there. All process groups are there in your project management, like project life cycle. Okay. Some processes will be happening earlier. Some processes will be taken care at the later part of the project. But these are overlapping iterative processes, right? Now, why the second point, why we have encompasses the all other 4 by MNC is monitoring and control processes runs throughout the project. Okay, so basically monitoring and control process monitors and controls each and every other process group's processes. For example, when we are developing the project charter, then also we can keep monitoring and control. When we are developing the project management plan as part of our planning process group, then also we can monitor and control. When we are actually producing something, then also we can monitor and control. So basically throughout the project life cycle, from the point where the project started and the point where the project is closed, monitoring and control processes will be performed over and over again to make sure that everything is in line with your expectation, everything is in line with your baselines. Fine. So here goes our process groups. We should not confuse about processes and process groups. We should not confuse about the sequentiality or non-sequential manner of this process group. We should not confusing these process groups with knowledge areas, which we are going to discuss in our next slide. Right? Fine. So what are knowledge areas? What are knowledge areas? Just now in our previous slide, we have discussed that the processes are grouped into 5 process groups depending upon what type of process that is. Now, the same processes are also grouped into 10 different categories depending upon the deliverables they produce, depending upon what are the information type, what are the part of the project management they are dealing with. Fine. So for example, all processes which are related to cost are there in one knowledge area. All processes which are related to initiating or managing the project is in one knowledge area, right? So basically we have 10 knowledge areas which group all the processes available in project management. Let's see what are those knowledge areas. The first one is our project integration management. All the processes which are required by project management team or the project manager to integrate the project. Those processes are grouped under project integration management. For example, develop project charter, develop project management plan, executing, project closing, etc. etc. Then comes project scope management. So all the processes which are performed by the project team and which are related to the scope of the project, those processes are bundled under project scope management. For example, define the scope. We have a process called define scope. So define scope will come under this project scope management. We have a process called control scope. Control scope will come under project scope management. The next knowledge area is project schedule management knowledge area. So anything, any process which is dealing with the project schedule, those will come under project schedule management. For example, develop schedule. For example, plan schedule management. Then comes project cost management. As we already have mentioned, any process which is related to managing the cost of the project, managing the budget of the project, those processes are grouped under project cost management knowledge area. Then comes quality management, then comes resource management. Please note that the sixth knowledge area, which is project resource management, this was earlier called project human resource management. But from the 6th edition of the PMBOK guide, they have changed it from human resource to resource management, because apart from the human resource, other resources in the projects are equally important. Then your project communication management. So in project communication management knowledge area, all processes are there under this knowledge area. The processes which are used by project management team or the project team to communicate with stakeholders, to communicate internally with the team, to communicate to external team. So basically overall all communications which are managed by the process, which processes, those comes under project communication management. Then we have risk management, then we have procurement management, all contract related, processes. Suppose you want to give your some part of your project, you want to outsource some part of the project to a different vendor. So this RFP, bid management and everything all comes under procurement management process. Right? And last one is project stakeholder management. Each and every process which you want to do, you would like to perform to manage your stakeholder engagement, those processes will come under project stakeholder management. Now, even if we have given sequential numbers like 1, 2, 3, 4, etc., etc., again, please understand that these knowledge areas are nothing but logical grouping of the processes. These knowledge areas are not sequential thing, right? These knowledge areas one doesn't precedes the other, right? All knowledge areas will be there in the project, and only thing you need to understand is whenever you are talking about some process, you need to understand under which knowledge area this process is grouped. Right? Many PMP aspirants makes this mistake. Many PMP aspirants make this mistake. They tend to think that knowledge areas are some physical thing, some physical phase-wise thing or something like that. That one comes after another, one is mutually exclusive to another. No, just remember this point: process groups and knowledge areas are logical grouping of processes. What are the actual physical things? The actual physical things are the processes itself. Okay, fine. So let's see how this three things relates to one another. Let me take a new one here. Fine. we will try to understand how these three things, okay, one is your processes, then other is our process groups, and then we have knowledge areas. Then we have, suppose, we have processes, right? Process. So let's just write P2, then P3, then P4, etc. So see, we have multiple processes in the project. Then we have process groups. Then we have knowledge areas. Okay. So what happens here is, let's see. Fine. So these processes are grouped into various process groups. Processes are grouped into various process groups. Then the same processes are also grouped into various knowledge areas. Right? Right? So please understand this logic that each and every process in project management will be under one process group and will be under one knowledge areas. Okay? Each and every process will follow this. So basically what happens actually, the mapping between process and process group, this is a one-to-one mapping. Fine. This is a one-to-one mapping. Why one-to-one mapping? Because one process will come under only one process group. Same thing goes for knowledge areas. That means one process will be mapped to one knowledge area. This is also a one-to-one mapping. So basically one process cannot be grouped under two different knowledge areas. Fine. So process and process groups have one-to-one mapping. Process and knowledge areas have one-to-one mapping. So this is what the relation between process groups and knowledge areas. There will be multiple questions in PMP certification exam. Multiple questions. Some of the questions you will not be able to understand whether they are talking about some process or process group. So once you have this clear knowledge between the relationships between process and process groups and knowledge areas, all questions it will be easy for you to answer, right? So we'll just wind up here, but before winding up, we'll just show you the list of processes which are there in project management. We'll just take one example here. For example, manage quality process. Okay? So manage quality is a process. This process is grouped under executing process group, and this process is grouped under knowledge area, project quality management. Same goes for, say, identify stakeholders. Identify stakeholders is grouped under process group, initiating process group, and identify stakeholder is grouped under knowledge area, project stakeholder management. So in our coming classes, we will discuss these processes in detail. But this video was to make you guys understand what is the relation between these three very important things in project management. Number one, processes. Number two, process groups. And number three, knowledge area. Thank you very much.